Sure. So I will start now for the second session. Thank you, Bhupesh, for setting it up. I think the second session is really focused on how do we, I mean, the panelists in first session talked about, the levers which are needed to be pulled to create demand. They talked about financing, they talked about government policy, they talked about how to bring down costs for the consumer. I think this panel is really about how do you supply those vehicles which are going to be in demand because of these different levers. And this the government's focus on indigenization or Atmanirbharta is really about upstream manufacturing. If you've been following Indian auto industry, uh, it's pretty clear that any vehicle which is sold in India is likely to be sort of assembled in India. The way policy structure is, the imports on fully built vehicles are pretty high to encourage local assembly. But when it comes to components, it's really up to the OEMs whether they source those components from India-based factories or they buy it from companies which are located in other parts of the world. And that's where I think the role of the upstream manufacturing and auto component manufacturing is very, very important. So that's what we will focus on this particular session. I don't think you could find a better set of people to have this discussion. I'll just quickly introduce our four panelists. We have for this session, we have Mr. Elon Chelian from Sanmina, India. Sanmina is a leading integrated manufacturing and technology solutions provider globally. Elon himself has been rooted in electronics manufacturing for the last 28 years across the world, and he's worked with companies including Seagate and Toshiba before coming back to India at Sanmina. Then we have Mr. Guru Prasad Mudlapur, who's the regional president and MD of Bosch Automotive Electronics in India. Bosch is, I mean, you might already know, is the world's biggest automotive supplier. Bosch initiatives in India. So Bosch has, I think, more than 10 different companies in India. Guru is responsible for sort of leading the charge on electrification as a combined sort of force. He has also been in upstream manufacturing in semiconductors and in automotive electronics for almost 30 years. Then we have Mr. Chetan Maini, who's the vice chairman at Sun Mobility. Chetan is known to really bring the first electric car to India back in 1999, known as Reva, which was later taken over by Mahindra. In his new role, he's now trying to push for an innovative solution in the form of battery swapping as a service to really sort of accelerate adoption of vehicles across categories: two-wheelers, three-wheelers, buses. And he already, Sun already operates in, I think, 11 cities. They have buses, two-wheelers, three-wheelers on their platform already operating across these cities. And then we have Mr. Ramesh Nair, who's an MD, who is the managing director at Aptiv India, which is again a global company at the forefront of developing connectivity solutions for new mobility. When it comes to high voltage connectors and high voltage wiring, Aptiv is really the gold standard. And Ramesh also has more than 28 years of experience in the electronics manufacturing. So welcome to all my panelists. As I said, this is really as good a panel as you can get when it comes to talk about manufacturing in India. So many thanks to the team at Yes Bank and the folks at Guidance Tamil Nadu to bring this group together. So I think we sort of overran on the last panel. So we have to be really efficient with this one, and we'll try to be as efficient as the way you run your factories, and Chetan, the way you run your swapping stations, right? So we'll just quickly open with opening remarks from all of you. We'll start with Guru, and then we go down to Chetan, Elan, and Ramesh, right? So really a very brief introduction of your view on electric mobility in general and the role you are playing in this space in India.
Okay, thanks, Manoj, and glad to be on this panel. Bosch, as you know, is a global player, quite active in electromobility worldwide. And I head the automotive electronics in addition to all the electrification at Bosch in India. The approach so far has been that we pre-invest in some areas where it makes sense to localize. We go with the market in some areas where things are going faster, for example, in 2 and 3 wheelers. But continue our global efforts to bring high quality, reliable solutions into the Indian market as things go on. This has really been the approach, and I think you specifically wanted to touch upon localization. Localization, in my view, is not the highest priority as of now, although it's one of the key things to make EVs going in the long run. Simply because localization today does not necessarily mean low cost. So there, we need to strike the right balance and then see how this develops. There are areas where we can add a lot of value, and that is the area we will focus on to begin with. But moving forward, we see how this develops, and we take it from there.
Yeah, Chetan, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. And I think that from the EV industry, COVID has definitely created an impact on all of us. But I think that in general, the EV industry now is here to stay based on where the technology is, the government, the emissions, the cost coming down. And I think the reassurance of the cleanliness that we've seen over the last few months is going to be another big driver in IC's markets, and seeing that more in the certain segments like the delivery segments where people have made a lot of commitments to electrification as a result of what they've seen on this area. So I think from a post-COVID point of view, I see delivery as being a large part on 2, 3, and 4 wheelers. I see personal mobility on 2 wheelers going up a lot because people would like to have social distancing. And I see a combination of what I would call shared but personal mobility on 2 and 3 wheelers. So if you think about the Ulus and the bouncers who use 2 wheelers, or do you think of certain, instead of larger buses, people will be using maybe 3 wheelers on more often. So there will be personal as well as shared transportation. So I think this is going to be a larger change for India on this front. In what we do and the role we try to play in this whole process is we're focusing on the 85% of the market, which is 2 wheelers, 3 wheelers, and buses. Today, the focus more is trying to create an open architecture platform for all 2 and 3 wheelers, which is around 23 million vehicles produced last year. And the idea is, can you get one solution that fits all on this front? And so by using 1 battery, 2 batteries, or 3 batteries, we can fit a bunch of form factors on this area. And as fundamentally battery swapping reduces the upfront price, addresses the issue of range anxiety, and refueling is under 2 minutes to address the issue of refueling time. So the idea we feel is with these areas, we could really make a difference. And our thought process is very partnership approached. So on one side, we have teamed up with over 10 OEMs who we integrate our technology with. On the other side, we have looked at a lot of players on the mobility solutions. So the Smarties and the Ubers and a host of fleet providers that we're working with. On the third side, we look at the distribution and network on this front. And we, a couple of months ago, signed up with Indian Oil Company, where we now have access to 30,000 outlets, and we're setting up the pilot of around 30 stations, which we are on way. And the fourth is we want to bring in partners who we believe could help from a technology point of view. And recently, Bosch has come on with an investment in the company. So we really feel that the way the future of electric mobility for us is around partnerships that would really enable the entire industry to grow. And how can we create an open solution that the entire industry can benefit and is a win-win for all the stakeholders, be it an OEM, us, energy provider, fleet operator. And only then, I think, can we really scale the industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Chetan. Elan, can you go next?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So let me give a brief introduction about Sanmina. Before that, I would like to congratulate Guidance, S Bank, and Tamil Nadu government for this initiative. And Sanmina is one of the top EMS companies in the world, Fortune 500 company, and we do high complex mission critical products for top OEMs and innovative companies in medical, telecom, automotive, and industrial products. Probably many of us do not know that we are producing electronics modules for one of the top OEMs of electric cars in North America. And in India, we are doing various electronics modules for all top OEMs of the world, and then two-wheelers and four-wheelers. And our recent initiative and our relation with the Indian government and building the nation in terms of electronics is in producing supercomputers and high complex medical products. And we believe this EV will fly. And we started our journey 10 years ago. And we work with various OEMs, and we are delivering a lot of high complex electronics modules for them. And in Tamil Nadu, we have collaboration with SIPCART and then Tamil Nadu government, and we are developing a center of excellence to nurture new talent and innovation. So what we believe is, as a very conservative or cost-sensitive society in India, we should look for innovation. And then on the other hand, we try to have a technological partnership with other better technology across the world. And we do have a very good engineering pool in India. So we have to nurture our engineering talent and then challenge ourselves to have a cost competitive solutions. If you see in EV, there are three major components. One is the motor. I can say it is kind of our heart. And other one is the electronics. It is like our brain. And next one is the battery, the lungs. All these things needed to run. So the major contributor of the cost comes from the battery. And I don't want to charge my car or my vehicle every day. So I would like to do the charging once in a week. So we have to look for long range batteries with a cost effective solution. So we should challenge ourselves to go for innovation in terms of batteries and all other components of EV. So this is what I have as of now. Back to Manoj.
Thank you, Elon, for really setting it up like that. I could see a smile on the faces of our panelists as well. Now we have Mr. Nair from Aptiv.
Hey, can you hear me? Hello, Manoj,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks, Manoj, and very good afternoon to all the panelists and distinguished people on the audience. Just to give a brief of what automotive industry in general is and what we at Aptiv are doing. So if you look at the automotive industry, which is at the onset of disruption, which is in an unprecedented scale, as we know, which is driven by mainly three factors, which is technological. The first is technological, which is autonomous driving, electrification, and connectivity. And then again is social, which is urbanization, rapid urbanization, then shared services, and a new way of working. And now also we are seeing a lot of disruptions in the way we work, shared workspaces, work from home, and all that. And again, third, the final and most important one is the regulatory. So if you look at the government, the federal government, the state governments, the various bodies, they all have their emission standards, their new norms. So these are all driving the demand across the globe and in India too. And the level of disruption, what we are going to see, which will be higher than or significant and outweigh anything what we have seen over the last 150 years of automotive history. And the pace of change is accelerating, and the next decade will be defining the way how the mobility evolves in terms of electrification, in terms of autonomous driving, in terms of connected cars, and all these technologies, all these are complementary. So autonomous cars, electrification is a complementary technology. So these are all complementary. And if you look at India too, there are people like Mr. Maini has been there in business so long, but we're seeing a lot of momentum happening since 2017 when government came up with a slew of policies and measures, and the Nagpur Declaration and initiative schemes like FAME 1 and 2. So we are seeing a lot of traction in the Indian market, but if you look at a scale, a comparative scale of the global, just talking about the passenger vehicles assets of the global volume of last year, 2019 volume was 2.1 million, including PHEVs, EVs. India has only a very minuscule share of say less than 5,000 or 4,000. So that is the number we are looking at. While China has close to 1 million, which is almost 47% of the world electric vehicle share. So if we look at it, we don't have the scale yet, and we are in a very, very nascent stage, which is which need to grow and which will grow also. But the Indian automotive is looking at a CAGR of, the next year projections, 10 years is looking like 47 or close to 50% CAGR, which will give, give opportunities for people, all people like us, and OEM, not just OEMs, all the people in the value chain. So this is what we are looking at. And India, again, India has an advantage, distinct advantage, and advantage in the sense that apart from our innovation, our cost-effective manufacturing, we can leapfrog because we don't have sunken investment in the IC engine technology and all that, and it will help us in leapfrogging to in the new age, the EVs, in the BEVs directly, without going through the stages like the other countries had to. So it is kind of levels the playing field, and we can have a same level playing field as others. And coming back to Aptiv, we are a global technology company, and we were formerly called Delphi, which the name changed after we divested our powertrain business in 2017. And even though we are 3 years old, we have 100+ years of legacy history of building automotive solutions. And we call ourselves a startup with a 100-year history. That is how we call ourselves. And we traditionally all our businesses are in the we call 3 mega trends, which is safe, green, and connected. So all our product portfolios will be all in the safe, green, or connected. So and electrification falls in the green category, as everybody is aware. And so we have been developing products for the EV segment in the last couple of decades, and we provide high voltage architecture, high voltage connection solutions, power distribution boxes, charging cord sets, and all globally. And in India too, also we have been working with a few OEMs, and we started manufacturing in India last year in 2019. We started manufacturing for a few Indian OEMs. So we are getting there, and we also have an engineering center which is very key, and which we consider as vital for getting to this market or accessing this market. So that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you everyone for sort of helping everyone understand your role in the ecosystem and also your early thoughts. I think since the session is focused on localization, I think I would love to hear from all of you. What does success look like? I mean, what is a good level of localization, especially considering we are in early stages? Also, what does the path to increasing localization look like? For example, if you ask government, they would want 100% of everything to be made in India, right? But we know practically that's going to be hard, right? And that also sort of goes against the entire tenets of international trade, right? Also, Mr. Nair mentioned, the scale which some of the other countries have established is very, very high, right? And we know with economies of scale, the costs go down. So that advantage already lies to some extent in other markets, right? So how, in that context, what do you really call a good localization, say over a period of 10 years and not just today? So Guru, we could start from you, and then we can go down to other panelists and I'll call their names.
Sure. Thank you, Manoj. As I said earlier, I think localization certainly makes a lot of sense, but in a phased manner. Not entire. I mean, it's also technically not possible to localize everything right now, and as we are in the current state of the industry today. For example, we don't yet have one of the key components, which is the lithium-ion battery production happening in India. But that said, I think the industry will follow volumes, and localization will certainly happen when we move forward. But I would say we would probably start off with large-scale localization with motors first. That's an area which can easily be localized. Although the higher power motors could take a lot of capital investment to get this going in terms of quality and reliability, but in terms of general localization trends, motors would certainly come first. I'm only now referring to localization of the entire part. The power electronics could come next. Power electronics although the electronics will continue to be imported and will be produced at the best costs all over the world, we will import as we do today with regard to a lot of electronics we produce in India. At least the final assemblies, the mechanics that go with the power electronics, the heat sinks, the thermal management, a lot of this can be done locally, and this packaging of this and power electronics as a whole will come into India quickly. The value addition in batteries will certainly happen right away. I think a lot of companies, including us, are looking at localizing battery manufacturing to begin with. Next step could be when cell manufacturing kicks off in India. That's when real end-to-end manufacturing of the batteries could happen. So I would see this in phases, and definitely 2 and 3 wheelers driving a lot of need for localization. But as I also said earlier, localization done a bit too early will only increase costs and thereby slow down adoption in the market. So the right level of localization at the right time and in the right volumes would certainly be the key to continue the localization spirit in India.
Sure. Thanks, Guru, for really sort of breaking it down for the audience. And I think what I hear is that we need to be strategic about localization. Too early could actually be opposite of what we want in terms of driving adoption. Also, we have to respect laws of economics, and some products will continue to be made more economically in certain parts of the world, but we can focus a lot more on our strengths. But at the same time, I think, as you said, I think the real, I would say, tick mark on localization really comes when we say we have a local cell plant or a local gigafactory as well, right? And which could be a while away. Chetan, I wanted to bring you in, because you are uniquely placed. You make your own battery pack, so you work with cell companies on one side, and you also work with OEMs on the other side, right? So, what do you think? What for you? As a company which is into manufacturing and services both, what does localization look like? Good localization look like for you? And also, I'll put you on spot on this. When do you see the first cell gigafactory come up in India?
Okay, I'm going to take a step back. I think that when we talk about localization today, there are things that can be done 100%, right? So when I look at EV components like chassis, suspension, steerings, plastic seats, clusters, harnesses, wheels, tires, all this can be done. But there are still a lot of companies, especially in the 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler space, that are getting a lot of kits out from overseas and importing it. So I think this is just, we are a hub for this in the country. We should just go 100% there. There's no questions asked on that front, right? The second part is areas like chargers and DC-DC converters. In some fields, this is being done a lot. For example, in one of our sister companies, we've been supplying chargers and DC-DC converters for 20 years. So, probably at lower power levels, a lot of companies today are making it. I think at the higher power levels and higher voltages, there is a little, there's a bit of a gap in the country, but the capabilities exist. And so if there's enough volume demand, there's no reason why we can't do that, because the technologies around UPSs and others are similar in nature to what it is. It has to be auto-grade available. So there's a very high thing to go, a high level of indigenization in that area. The third, I think, as Guru pointed out, was motors and controllers. And in some sectors, this can be done very quickly, in 12 to 18 months at the smaller power levels. And I think the larger power levels may take 24 to 36 months, because mainly driven by volumes. I don't think it's a technology issue on this area, but you would see the 2 and 3 wheelers come in on this. On the battery packs, I'd like to divide them into maybe 3 areas, right, and come to your answer on the gigawatt. The first is the assembly of the pack, which is electronics, thermal management, mechanical, connectors, electrical. We do that today. We assemble our packs. So except for the cell, everything is today indigenized, including the hardware and the software. And each of our battery packs has 3 onboard computers. So it's fairly sophisticated when you come to look at it on this area. And this can completely be done today. I think from cell manufacturing, it would take around 24 months from when we say go to set up a decent plant size, right? And that go needs sufficient volume to say that, listen, this can happen. So it's a done deal today. There's enough technology and companies to make equipments and available that I think today it's an easy thing. So the question is, can we have a strong policy? Can we have commonization across platforms that enables that to have scale? And then from saying go, it's a 24-month period to set up a gigawatt plant on this area. So if that can, and I think some companies are talking about integrating storage along with electric mobility, maybe that can accelerate it because the demand could be across two platforms, right? The next step is that even when you do cell manufacturing, you're likely to probably import a lot of the components for it, right? Because we don't have all the raw materials, but there can be the phase of maybe between 24 to 48 months where you create certain facilities, for example, the graphite separators, the pouches, the cans, all of these could probably be indigenized on this area because they are raw materials that can be available in the country and look at it. And then comes the last bigger question that when you really want to go all the way to the lithium side, and I think this is where we probably need longer term partnerships, like we've done on the oil side with South America and other countries that have larger reserves, where we can go down to the raw material side of it. But to just give you a perspective, if you think of the cost of the pack, and then you think of the cost of lithium, that may be 10% or less, or 6-7%. So it is an important portion, but we can achieve so much more. We can first do the entire vehicle, then the powertrains, then the battery assembly, and then all the other parts. So everyone starts to talk about, hey, we don't have lithium side of it. But from a vehicle point of view, that may be 3% of the cost of the vehicle of indigenization. So let's hit the 97% first, and then figure out the last bit of this front.
Thanks, Chetan. I think it's similar to Guru's point. I think you also suggest that be strategic. Also, a point you stressed is really where we can be 100%, let's be 100% as soon as possible, instead of sort of being lax on those fronts at least. Ilan, I wanted to come to you now, because you are helping. I mean, we know Ether works with you. You help them build some of their products as well, right? And startups, a lot of startups are coming in this space, right? What role do you see a company like you could play, or other big manufacturers could play in helping them start, helping startups really get into the manufacture? Either they work with you, or they to startups in this space who are getting into hardware side of things, which is sort of new from Indian context.
So if you take in terms of electrical vehicles, now almost from 10%, now it becomes 60 to 70% become electronics inside. And I go through the same sequence of motor, electronics, and then go to battery. So if you see the motor, that is a showcase. I can say Tamil Nadu is ahead of the curve in bringing motor manufacturers to Tamil Nadu. It is because of a collaboration with our even though startup or some other companies. So it's a collaboration. Government understands that yes, we should move forward. So those kind of initiative already started, but that one or two will not suffice our demand. So we have to work with some more players in motor segment to bring some more technology partners, or we can ask them to put a plant over here to address the motor industry. Electronics is ocean. Even not only in automotive, you consider anything, mobile, we talk about mobile or anything, still we say we produce electronics, but I say no. In electronics, what we produce, still 70 to 80% we are importing. All these chips, still we are importing. So even in a couple of forums earlier, I shared my view. Electronics, the thing is semiconductor chips. We don't need to produce chips, but we can start with the fag end, like final testing, packing. Those is almost 20% value add for the chips. So that we can start first. We don't need to go to the semiconductor first. So at the first step we can go. And we can add some value into that. So little bit of localization come from that electronics industry. And in terms of what kind of value add or the contributions like tier 1 companies like us doing is, we already do a lot of electronics for world top OEMs in 4-wheelers and 2-wheelers. So we have a very good knowledge of all the DFX solutions and the manufacturability, testability, all those solutions. So we are sharing our knowledge and we have our own databases. So that is an advantage. All the companies, we don't call any of our customer names because we work with various companies. So we share all the technology, what we learned across, and we standardize our own standards in terms of DFX solutions. So we share to the partners so that they can have the better learning curve faster to get into the market and avoid all other any basic challenges. So that's what we could able to provide to all our partners. Back to Manoj.
Thanks, Suhan. Just quickly wanted to bring Guru in again. He has to rush. So last comments, Guru, and I want to pepper it with some of the comments which you made earlier. So government has done a lot in this space. I don't want to go. I mean, the GST, the road tax, but most of that is really on demand side, right? And in this session, we want to focus on how do we, sort of start localizing, right? So how do we what kind of recommendations do we need to bring across to the government, right? Because there seems to be a sense of urgency in localizing, right? But the industry players who sort of are people like who are in the space for the last 30 years, they have a slightly better view of how to sort of face that, right? So what do we tell government? What can they do, both at central government level and state government level, like at Tamil Nadu, to sort of create that path to localization?
I think, like you said, the government has done its bit. It's now for the demand to pick up. Unfortunately, COVID put a spanner in the works of a lot of EV plants so far. So I believe this is a passing phenomenon, and 2021 could look very, very different. And specifically, I think the incentives are there, although not really consumed in 2020. These will certainly spur demand. What could certainly help is to focus on certain areas. For example, fleets. Fleets, B2B segments are really areas where TCO is positive, and that's an area where economically it starts to make sense for electric vehicles to come in. Solutions like battery swapping could be promoted. This will certainly help adoption of EVs in a bigger way, especially in 2 and 3 wheelers. I think it makes a lot of sense in those areas. I would say these would be the top few things that could be done. Of course, the industry has always looked for incentives. We've got a lot of it. There is appetite for investment. If the volumes are there and it economically makes sense, I would say investments will follow, and definitely localization will start to happen.
Sure. Just one, Guru, very quick. B2B, does B2B offer you enough scale to localize? Even if, let's say, we start with B2B, but it's it used to be 7% of the market in cars. It's going to go down to 3% this year because of COVID, right? And it's even 2-3% or less than 1% in 2-wheelers, right? Does that offer enough scale to localize?
Yeah, I mean, we need to start somewhere, right, Manoj? It's these are segments where it's not just for the sake of bringing in an EV. These are areas where it will make sense, commercially make sense for the operators to have an EV fleet and reap benefits also in terms of their own position. So there, I think EV certainly makes sense. So although the volumes may be small, take overall electric vehicle category in 2-wheelers. I think it's 24-25 million 2-wheelers today. And if we take 10% of that, it's 2 million. And we really don't have installed base to localize 2 million today. And if you even branch that out, maybe 30% of that goes into the fleet segments. It's a pretty large volume. And I mean, we totally ignore the e-rick market. It's grown beyond 1 million vehicles in India, although completely, I would say, unorganized growth. But it's there is certainly a large market there as well. So I think there is potential to go in. We have to start somewhere. I won't put too much focus on, for example, passenger cars. Because the volumes are really not there, and at the very low volumes, if you localize and increase costs so much, it doesn't make sense to go. So only the appropriate level of localization in such segments, but much higher localization in other segments would be the way to go.
Great. Great. Thanks, Guru. Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you. Sorry
You have
about
to
this.
rush. No worries. No worries. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Great. So now I want to take the same question to the other panelists as well, starting from Mr. Nair, right? So the question really is, do we need government to do something else as well? What is that? Or as an industry, you are satisfied with what government has done, and now it's the onus is really on OEMs to create demand, and then companies like yours to sort of help them source locally for that demand.
Yeah. So the question is very relevant because government is doing a lot of steps initiatives now. Central government and the state governments, of which Tamil Nadu has really done well with they have been a pioneer in the policies, and other 9 states also, apart from Tamil Nadu, have come up with policies. But there need to be a uniformity of policies across the country, not just in the states, but everything need to be uniform and similar policies. And because government is a big driver in generating demand. In having policies, in buying, in creating demand by using for all the government purchases, all the government vehicles, all the government departments can start using. It can be made compulsory, and also this effective common standard policy will create a confidence in to all these manufacturers, and also this can create bolster demand. And all government can again think of several state governments are bringing in subsidies or giving subsidies on capital, but incentives can be given to the component manufacturers for sales, incentives on sales like what we do for exports. And again, currently the duty structure there are different differential duty structure for each item. So if it can be made to for a lower value addition item, if it can be made to zero, for raw materials, basic raw materials, it can be made to zero, it will really drive down the cost. And also, big investment is required in R&D for sure, and labs, testing and validation labs for high voltage testing with capabilities. And government, if government can invest, that can really help all the players in the ecosystem, all the startups, everybody can make use of that. And again, another main thing is the adoption of standards, because we need to have a common standard. And because globally, if I'm just citing a few examples, because for the inlet, US has a standard called Type 1, and Europe has another standard which is called Type 2 for inlet, inlet connectors and tailings for the power inlet. And China has a standard called GBT, where Japan has another called CHAdeMO. So India is predominantly using Type 2, but this kind of standardization is looking at the volumes off-the-shelf products. If we can look at this, having a common standard across India, driven by the government and by across OEMs, will really help in reducing the cost and helping localization the process. And also another aspect is as usage goes up, the power rates in India are not going down either. So if you look at the oil prices, it has not really gone up in the last few years, whereas power has really significantly increased in most states. So if for electric vehicles, if there is some power subsidy, or that will also help for the specific usage, if we can restrict that. Yep. And also some challenges are from the state or central electricity board, some networks being unstable. So that can also be deterrent. Unstable networks can be deterrent also. Yeah. So these are the just some of the points I would like
sure.
Government intervention. Yeah, thanks.
So, thanks, Mr. Nair. I think that's a very sort of important set of areas you've highlighted. I think it's the point around getting the tariff right is very important, especially in the initial period, because we already have higher tariff on the fully built vehicles, so they cannot come anyways. And if you want to promote local assembly, at least the way Chetan and Guru sort of highlighted, at least let them get those input materials at a price. For example, cell, we have a duty of 5%, which is going to go to 10% next year, but we know that we don't have a cell plant coming up. That only increases the price of Chetan's battery, right? So why not just have a clear plan that okay, it's going to be low for a certain time period, and then probably that time period is enough to start looking at localizing. Also, I think the points around technology investments, probably looking at some supply side incentives for manufacturers, which I think Niti Aayog is looking at actively, and we might see something at some point in time. You also talked about standards. So I think I'll pick that sort of point from your inputs and go to now Ilan. So in addition to the question I've asked on, what else government could do, specifically wanted to get your inputs on, does anything need to be done specifically on standards? So one is the charging standards, which Mr. Nair already brought up, but is there any other part of the value chain where the standards need to be brought in at this point in time?
So if you see, government, we have overall very good incubation centers in terms of R&D. But the problem here is we develop some of the new technologies, but there is no one to handhold them or fund them until they become mature and manufacturability and the scalability. So government need to have such a special policy or substantial subsidies to bring that R&D and new technology patents to bring to the scalability. So that funding is not there, so all the people are struggling. That is one. And other one is, I can say that why can't government think like put a mandate that all the petrol and gas pumps should have the battery charging stations or swappable stations? They have to put some drastic targets. Then only we have to push and get it done faster. So the technology or the policy has to be pushed towards existing available places to bring it with some target numbers. Then we can go into that. And the third one is, I think government is supporting to bring in technology companies to come over here, collaborate with all the players here, and then bring to improve our cost and then the scalability. So these are all the three things what I could see.
I think that's a very valid point. If we look at the markets which Mr. Nair talked about earlier, where the scale at a macro level has come. China, now Europe from this year. I think there is an underlying mandate which is driving it. In China, for example, cities banned conventional vehicles. Then in Europe now this year we have a very strict regulation on emissions, 50 gram CO2 per kilometer, right? And you just can't meet it unless you produce a certain quantum of electric vehicles. I think at some point, maybe not right now, but at some point, India might also need to look at some sort of a mandate. Maybe not a top, or maybe even California, for example, has a California ZEV program, right? So I think India also at some point might need to look at a mandate, and I think maybe Yes Bank team can sort of help conceptualize that and work with the government. Now, coming, yeah, sorry, Ilan, go ahead.
Our bigger country nearby, you can see all over the road there are e-cycles. So we should not think about one size fits all. We should segment into sub 40 kilometers and more than 80 kilometers. So sub 40 kilometers, we have to go with a different policy so that the crowd will buy more and the incentive should be more. So such a different out-of-box thing should come into the place.
Sure. Chetan, you've been involved, I would say, the most in the policy side discussion as well, and you sort of had a small win as well recently, wherein formally it was allowed for the vehicles to be sold without batteries. What else you think government needs to do? Also, standards, that keeps coming up, especially for swapping. Do you think there's a need for certain standards, and what are those?
So I think in terms of what could be done on this area, you want a level playing field today. And so the taxation policy is such that it doesn't cause a level playing field. For example, if the batteries can be separated, batteries GST is 18%, a vehicle GST is 5%. So batteries should also come at the 5% GST, for example. Second thing is, even Naveen Manjal talked about putting up charging stations all across. We're putting swapping stations all across. But the services related to charging or swapping are today has a GST of 18%, while a charger has a GST of 5%, right? And public transportation today is at 5%. So the services, now you have a rickshaw driver who's using it and he has to pay 18% tax for going green, which doesn't make sense. So what's happening is there should be a level playing field on the taxation policy, that when the government has said they're going to support it, how does it fit the entire ecosystem? So I think this is one thing that's been missing. The same thing around the subsidy side of it from FAME policy. There's not still clarity around how does a swap solution, for example, a person get a benefit, right? So the government's policy has to be technology agnostic, and the framework of operations of getting support should also be very clear. There's a gap, what I would call, between the spirit and what's really happening. We need to go by the spirit. The vision is clear in the country, But the ground reality is that to get some of those concessions are challenging. To register some vehicles in certain cities are challenging. To get an electricity connection for putting in infrastructure is very concerning. And while there's a new policy that says that there is lower tariff for electricity, or it's cost plus X% you have to do it, it's a broad policy, but hasn't been implemented by a state. So when someone actually goes to get a station and say, can I get this tariff? He can't get it. So the fact today is that we've got a lot of great policies. Can we first implement them in spirit, right through, get the last operational part be done? That itself will help the industry a lot. And two, rationalize areas around taxation so that irrespective of how you do it, there's a commonness around these. I think these two can benefit tremendously. The third part would be that we always think of, in indigenization, we think of disincentivization, and disincentivization will increase import duties. What about cross-incentivization, right? So let's just take battery packs. Let's get cells today for 0% for a couple of years, right? But let's go packs at 20%. And people who make packs in India get such concessions on this area. So people start to move towards that front on this area. We could do that to many other forms where there is a way that it is phased out and people start to have an incentive to produce in India versus a disincentive on this front, right? And that I think is something that hasn't been done in the past. And I do believe that this could be very beneficial in this industry. To your point around standardization, it's a very thin line of what you standardize, right? I think when technology is changing so much and innovation is so high, standardization is limiting innovation. So the batteries that have a certain performance today, a year from today or 3 years from today, will be 30, 40% better. What if you standardize it today and say it has to be this size in this area? That would just completely curtail it. So it's not good to standardize that. But what could be good to standardize is the first is safety. Right? It's very important that safety systems are very clear and that is standardized, right? And ARA already has a mechanism, but maybe over time that would be added more. The second part is when you think of these areas, a customer doesn't have an idea of what is A versus B, right? So you've seen in industry, for example, an air conditioner, you have a 1-star, 3-star, 5-star rating. You know what you're getting, right? Maybe there could be a star rating equivalent to say that if I'm getting a battery as a service from company A, B, or C, I know what I'm getting because there's some way of rating what's important. Now, this means it's a consumer-driven thought process. It's not a regulatory-driven process, but it's consumer-driven to allow consumers to understand what could happen on this, right? And I think the last part is probably the voltage side. I'm talking now of 2 and 3 wheelers, right? Globally, everyone's worked off 48 volts. Reason is above 60, it's a safety issue. You need redundancy on this area. And a 48 volt system today can go all the way to 20 kilowatts, which means there is no real power level issue from anything from a scooter to probably 1-ton LCV. Can still be powered within that area. And that's like the 23 million vehicles. If you standardize the voltage, which is also being used by the hybrid industry globally on this area for start-stop applications, you're likely to get costs down. You're likely to get standardized of componentries on this area. And any OEM that's doing it, their powertrain is always that, which means that they can use battery A, B, or C. Maybe the size and form factor is slightly different and the tech is slightly different, but the ingredients are identical that allow them to integrate the technology quicker. So it gives consumers an option on this area. Separating the batteries allows consumers to choose A, B, or C, allows OEMs to probably accelerate because they can work with multiple players, right, on this area. So it allows them to have multiple solutions for customers. Think of different service providers like an Airtel or Reliance, others, right? So you will then have this option for consumers on this area. It reduces the concern from consumers an upfront price on this front, right? And it allows also to share the cost. So therefore, what you're talking is you earlier only had the consumer and the OEM. Today, you're going to have infrastructure players. So now you've divided the investment between customers, OEMs, and infrastructure players, which allows the scale of the business to become much higher.
Thanks, Chetan. I think, as I said in the beginning, this is probably the best panel we could get. And now I mean, the list of ideas is becoming too big. I think the challenge really is, and Chetan really highlighted it, and having worked as part of a government agency myself for almost 2 years, the policy mostly reflects the right ideas, principles, sometimes it doesn't. For example, in FAME, while we think it's technology agnostic, it's not really technology agnostic, because the subsidy is linked to the size of the battery, which discourages swapping, and lithium titanate for bus as a solution, right? So I think, I don't know how we do it, but the challenge really is to how do we translate this so much knowledge which the industry has, right, into policy, and then bridge the gap into the operational framework which is being created. Somehow that, something is lost, and sort of starts hurting, even though, as you said, mostly the policy is right, but the implementation becomes challenging. Now, I think the one point which you mentioned, and which I wanted to sort of touch myself, you have a lot of focus on partnerships. India in general has a lot of focus on partnerships. Let's do with partnerships. This is my view. When I look at two companies which I consider successful in e-mobility globally, the first one is Gogoro, and the second one is Tesla. My measure of success is not market cap, it's the number of vehicles they sell. Like Gogoro has more than 15-20% market share. Tesla has it's the best vehicle in its segment across countries. What is common to these two companies is vertical integration. Like Gogoro has a bottom-up design of its vehicle, own pack, own controller, bunch of stuff. Other than sell, they invest in their swapping station, they sell their own vehicles. Tesla even goes beyond. Now hopefully they're going to launch their own cell plant as well in Germany, right? Very different approach from what we are propagating in India. Is the only reason for propagating this approach in India that we don't want the lack of capital, or people don't want to invest all the capital themselves, or we think this is a better solution than vertical integration? And Chetan, I'll start with you and then go.
So let me give you the example of the phone industry. Think mid 2000s. Think how Motorola's and Nokia's were vertically integrated. They did everything themselves on this area, which is essential because it wasn't existing on this front. Okay, think today of that within a year, a company knowing nothing can go into mobile phone manufacturing. They get screen from A, battery from B, processor from C, put an Android system, and give a phone at a very different level. So why was this possible? Was because of the maturity in the industry, one, and two, what was important to the customer you could still control. So the touch point of how the interface was, you still controlled on this area, right? And so I think going forward, it's going to be a lot around the brand and the control of this. And I think in areas like 2- and 3-wheelers, the distributed manufacturing model is more likely to be successful. It also distributes at areas, but at early stages, you couldn't do it. And I'm going back when we had to do a lot of stuff 20 years ago because nothing was available. Right, I set up a charger plant, I set up a plastics plant, I set up all these different plants within our group companies because nothing was made in India at that point, and I had to do it. Would I do that today? No, I would focus on what's core to us and use other partners on this area. So I do believe that the partnership model can accelerate, can reduce investments, can accelerate development, while you control what's important to the end customer. The OEM interaction can control that, or that partner. Now, the fact when you do this is you have to be hand in glove with people. And do we have a nature as companies and people to do that? And that's where I think we have to step up, right? It has to be a win-win on this area, not that I'm taking one from you and you're taking one from me. So how do we create win-win situations? If we can do this, I think we can accelerate this hugely. And you talked about these two companies, but you didn't talk about China and what they did, right? So their market, their 3-wheelers is, of 2-wheelers is 25 million or 30 million last year, right? They've gone the approach of democratizing it, right? Where controllers were made at volume by different suppliers, motors at different suppliers. And then you had OEMs who integrated these pieces and put it together, and they went to market in 6 months. So I think that this partnership model has it, but it needs a lot of tier ones. It needs a lot of people to also invest and believe that the other one is also going to do it because you're connected to each other, right? And so therefore, it is, I think, the long-term way. In the short-term way, I think you'll have to bundle it up to create enough demand for the short term. But I think long-term, the partnership model will be probably more relevant for India.
Thanks, Chetan. I won't dwell too much on it, but I think the point around maturity makes a lot of sense. If the market is mature, maybe you work more closely with partners. But I think that's a view. I think you think the market is mature. Some people may think. I mean, I sometimes think maybe the market is not mature, and partnership slows things down. Like if, for example, I don't know. This is my view. If you had vertically integrated from 2017 onwards, right, probably you would have had a bigger scale. Maybe you needed more investment for sure, but you would have more scale on ground today, and then you could unpack into sort of bringing more partners in. Again, this is my view. Ilan, to hear from you as well on this. It's then okay. You can share your comment. Yeah.
It's again depends on the local demand. For example, we split into insourcing and outsourcing. This insourcing or the vertical integration is 20 years ago methodology. So now if you see all the industries, all the companies wants to be product engineering. They don't want to touch their hands in the manufacturing or what are all the other things. So they want to outsource everything. So we are in the outsourcing world, and only lag what we have is the confidence and the demand in the local to go to the outsourcing fast. So one way, if you have a good chunk of money, then people can do it by themselves, all vertical integration. But now the industry itself, there are a lot of kings. We don't want a person with jack of all. We want king in individual area, many kings we have. So we want to utilize many kings to have the scalability faster. So if you want to scalability, you have to go with the outsourcing. If you want to go slow and steady, you need to go with vertical integration. So I would say that Maini point is very correct. I agree with that. So we have to go with the partnership, but we have to create a demand and then connect to get to the speed.
Mr. Nair, what do you think of this topic?
Yeah, it's again $1 million question, because to have integrate vertically or otherwise, every country had this, every company had this challenge, and I agree with both the panelists, and it has to be selective also, because unlike in the past where capital was available, and if you think of General Motors, they had everything. They used to have completely integrated. Nothing was outside at a given point of time, and we were also part of General Motors once. And when you look at Tesla, they have obviously battery, which is a key component, and they are driving, they are designing, they are manufacturing batteries, but other components they are outsourcing. So it is not everything they are making in-house, and they are not integrating everything, but they are looking at what are the differentiators in terms of their product offerings, which obviously is the battery is the key. Battery, the software is the key, and which they are holding that in-house. So, and like Mr. Maini said, it has to be selective. Partnership has to be the order of the day, especially in India, because otherwise investment will be huge for any given company. So it has to, even for the downstream or upstream players, the investment will be higher, and everybody has to be aligned, and everybody has to invest. So it has to be selective. So what I would say is that it has to be a strategic thing. It has to be a strategic integration. So that is in summary. Yeah.
Great. So I think I'll take close to 75 years of experiences view, which is sort of consensus, which is driven by consensus that partnerships is the way to go in India. And I think if anyone wants to know how to stitch partnership, they should reach out to Chetan. He's probably the man with most partnerships in the country right now. 10 OEMs. Like when you look at IC, probably they're not even 10 OEMs in the country. So, and he's done 10 OEM partnership in the EV value chain. I think that is also very important for this ecosystem, right? Conventionally, tier 1 suppliers are used to work with big companies. Now we are seeing a lot of small companies. How do they organize themselves to start working with small companies, internally, right? Because they have high cost structures, there's more value to their time, but these companies are small, nimble, they want things to move fast at a lower price, right? So how do companies like yours organize themselves would also be key. We are at time. Just want to take few questions from the audience and then maybe close the session. I'm just trying to see. There's a lot of questions which are there. Let me see. Yeah. So somebody is asking, do you still think hybrids have a role to play in Indian e-mobility evolution? Chetan, you can start.
Sure. I think that hybrids came in the late 90s, 97, when Prius and stuff came out. And you've now come to a point where the EV technology has come way forward. So for us as a going forward area, focus needs to be in what's the future on this front. So hybrids are matured. India has a lot of stop and go driving, much slower speeds. And for these applications, and the cost of electrification has come down, it directly makes sense to go electric on this front. Where hybridization could have a role in the next 5 to 7 years is that there are a lot of existing vehicles in the fleet. There could be cost-effective conversion solutions that add hybridization, which could potentially give you a 20% savings on fuel and maybe 20% emissions or 30% emissions. And these technologies could be something that can be added on to existing fleets. But I think from new areas going forward, focus needs to probably be on electrification, which has the most impact, because we think both from an energy security point of view, as well as a climate change point of view. And I think the benefits that you'll get in the form factors that you have in India on this front, where the car side of it is much smaller, and the cars that use high range are much smaller. And in that also, the electrification can be much cheaper today. So it doesn't really get you where you want to be today, right? So I think it's like the 2G, 3G, 4G. Now you're setting up a new infra, new business. Where do you focus on? You focus on 4 and 5G, and that's where you put your effort in.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the advantages of being a little late to the party. You get to choose the best, best technology to go after, right? And I think that's what happened with mobile phones in India. Everyone didn't really have to buy that handheld phone, that landline, and we could migrate to mobiles and laptops. Mr. Nair, do you want to also add to the comment hybrids? Because in India, in other countries still sort of promote hybrids a little bit, at least plug-in. But in India, we have a very anti-view to even plug-in. And the GST rate on plug-ins is 43% versus 5% on EVs.
Yeah, I also generally agree with what Mr. Maini said. Plug-in hybrids definitely will be there in India. It's the need of the hour in India because of the range anxiety and things like that, because of the infrastructure. So it will be there for. And the key point was what Mr. Maini mentioned was it can be retrofitted to the existing things. So that makes sense in the short to medium term, say 6 to maybe 10 years, till maybe 6 to 8 years. We can look at having plug-in hybrid as well, coexisting with the battery electric vehicles or fully electric. So this can coexist, but at some point of time we have to look fully electric to get the other advantages of zero carbon emission and all that. So it is there. It's on a short to medium term, hybrid will stay or need to stay.
Good. So we are at time. Just would request 1 minute closing remark from all of you on there are a bunch of suggestions which have already been shared, and I think the onus is on the teams from Yes Bank and Guidance Tamil Nadu to sort of see how we take them forward. I think this is really I would say a lot of which should be actioned on. But just last set of comments on what else could be done or important on localization of the EV value chain. We can start from you, Mr. Nair, and then go to Elon, and then Chetan, we could close with you.
Yeah, because this topic, everybody has been talking about this localization, though there is, we have challenges on economies of scale, so limited, OEMs. So we have to have partnerships, and we have to have, consolidation of OEMs. We have to, there need to be public-private partnerships, and again, engineering is the key, innovation is the key, because with the level of startups we have and the innovation we have and we want, that is the key, because innovation is a great driver to even localize. And we need engineering in the sense that it needs to be cost engineering or frugal engineering, especially, for like the battery swapping. We need that kind of initiatives to drive down the cost. And we have to design to a price, design the processes, design the products. Otherwise, we'll never have the required cost. Like Mr. Munjal said, it will be always 20 to 30% of cost, which government cannot subsidize for long. So we have to break the cost barrier, and localization will come, but it has to come because it's the order of the day, because of the current COVID pandemic and the geopolitical situations prove that we have, the localization is a prerequisite. So, and market is exciting at this point. So, everybody need to invest and commit to themselves. So, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah. Ilan?
So government policies has to be further fine-tuned to increase the demand. And then we have to encourage the technological partners. So automatically the people will start to localize to take the fruits from the higher demand and higher localization. Thank you.
So Manoj, I'll add to another point. I think there is an opportunity of commonization with customization to increase volumes. For example, Tesla uses the same cell from its car to a truck. You can use the same cell from a two-wheeler to a bus, which means the right technologies, which are India-centric, could create common modules that are platforms for everyone to use, but they will integrate it in their own ways and therefore create the customization and keep the brand value. But if we could create some common thought processes around this, we can drive volumes far, far faster on this area and get a bunch of gigawatt factories to do it. The second part is taking that one step further, you look at areas like battery swapping. More commonization means you're sharing most of it on this area, which again reduces this area. And the third is there's an opportunity to have standardization around electronics a lot. Example, most scooters are either 1 kilowatt or 2.5 kilowatt. Three-wheelers are maybe 3 to 5 kilowatts, right? Imagine having standard 48 volt hardware modules that are built at high volumes and millions at this level. But the software is something that people do themselves. So therefore, there is a differentiation of the acceleration and the optimization of the system. But you use common hardware, which is easily available to everyone, can be fixed very easily and serviced, but you have things. So the key is commonization, customization that would drive volumes and can help indigenization maybe 3 to 5 years early.
Thanks, Chetan. That's a novel idea. I think I'll take that home with myself as well. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Nair. Thanks, Ilan. Thanks, Chetan. Thanks to Guru, who left early. I think really powerful discussion, I would say. I do it quite often, and I think this helped me learn a lot myself as well, right? So thanks again to the organizers at Yes Bank and Guidance Tamil Nadu. Now I would request Clifford to sort of come and wrap it up and sort of thank the panelists as well.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Manoj. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As we come to the end of this session, I'm delighted to thank all the speakers for sharing a wonderful insight. Guidance Northern Investment Promotion Agency, being a 28 years old organization facilitating investment in Tamil Nadu, has taken various measures over the years to keep Tamil Nadu as a top investment destination in India. I would like to thank Dr. Neeraj Mittal, our Managing Director, constantly looking at innovative methods to bring together the ecosystem for collaboration. On behalf of Guidance, I would like to thank Sri Anil Srivastava for delivering the keynote address. My heartfelt thanks to all the panel members who have taken their time out for making this event successful. A very special thank to the Yes Bank team for partnering with Guidance in bringing this event together. Thank you, Mr. Mahesh Krishnamurthy and Mr. Nikhil Sani for your relentless support. Thank you, Mr. Bhuvesh and Mr. Manoj for moderating the discussion and eliciting the various valuable insight from the panel members. Finally, I'm also thankful all the wonderful participants who attended this session and staying with us for the last 2 hours. I'm Clifford Lee. I'm leading Auto team at the Guidance. I'm be glad to support any of your queries. Wish you all a pleasant afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.